gophers and other vertebrates are a nuisance as well. So, Corey, you can add anything to that introduction, but we'll turn the time over to you.
It's just a bunch of BS and niceties, that's all. Thanks, Ben. Okay, first off, as you guys are aware, any questions or anything, you can put them in the Q&A. But I will have some spots that I am looking for feedback, so if you can type those in the chat, then that would be fantastic. Like you said, we're going to go over vertebrate pests in the orchard. Hopefully, I'll cover most of what you're dealing with, and I'm going to kind of look at it from like the sky view rather than super extremely in depth. But hopefully, it'll give you some ideas and some help. Okay, so nuisance wildlife. There's a couple different definitions of what makes an animal a nuisance animal. But usually, and if you're looking at the state definition, it's animals causing damage to property, livestock, or crops. And then you have different categories within that. There's depredating wildlife, and that's including predatory wildlife, fur bearers, and prohibited animals. And we'll kind of cover some of all of those. So, first off, how to deal with these animals. What animals can you take? What are legal? What is not? So this is a list from the Division of Wildlife that no license is required to remove these animals. And when I say remove, we're talking about kill, euthanize, and we'll get into why relocation isn't usually an option. But no license is required for field mouse, gopher, ground squirrels, jackrabbits, raccoons, prairie dogs, except the Utah prairie dog. That one's a threatened species. Red fox, striped skunk, coyote, nutria, which I haven't seen any in Utah, but it's possible. Virginia opossum, which they are here now. We've caught 7 of them in Grand County, in the Moab area. That's where I am. Muskrats and marmots. So these animals, because of their ability to cause damage and their ability to increase in population, and a lot of times their proximity to housing developments and different things like that, they've made it so you don't have to have a license if you need to control these animals. Now, there's some animals that you need a COR or a certificate of registration. That one would be Utah prairie dogs. These are animals that are of concern, their population is of concern, and they do realize they can cause problems. So you would need to reach out to the Division of Wildlife and get a license or a registration to handle these animals. A lot of times they will handle them rather than you. So Utah prairie dogs. Then there's other non-game species, and there's a whole list. If you go onto the Division of Wildlife website and type in non-game species, you'll come up with a huge list. But some of the examples that you might come across, pika, shrews, kangaroo rats, Abert squirrels, like the one pictured here. More typically, you're going to see those in Grand and San Juan counties in like the Ponderosa forest areas. Squirrels and bats. So again, these can cause problems. We don't have the fruit bats, luckily, so you don't have to worry about bats in an orchard a lot. And then a lot of these animals aren't really going to eat fruit, but these are just some of the examples of them. Okay, so prohibited activities. Straight from the Utah law and regulations, a person may not take, possess, import, export, transfer, or release into the wild, and it's talking about all these other animals that we listed as non-game species pose because they pose a threat to wildlife populations or the environment or human health or safety. Is a good reason not to release these or relocate them. It can be inhumane on the animal and stressful on them. They have a low success rate for most relocations, especially on some of these smaller animals. They did a study in, I think it was Michigan. They did 50 raccoons, and only 2 of them were relocated successfully. All the rest died. In Moab here, we had a bear that the Division of Wildlife relocated to Monticello, which is 50 miles away, and it was back a week later. Luckily, it didn't cause any more damage after it came back, but a lot of the times it's kind of a waste of effort. You heard the song "The Cat Came Back." It's kind of the same thing a lot of these times. but it also can cause a problem to somebody else that you're dumping it in the vicinity of. So I hear all the time, "Oh yeah, there was a squirrel on my property and I caught it and I relocated it and I put it there's a ranch there and it'll be fine." Well, now the rancher has to take care of that problem animal, and that animal doesn't know where its food sources are, so it becomes a problem almost immediately. There was another guy that called me and said that he saw a skunk swim in the Colorado River, and somebody had dumped it off on the other side, and it was already trying to swim back to its home. So, these animals will do a lot to overcome that relocation. So don't do it. And then on top of that, it's a law. So it's actually a Class B misdemeanor to relocate an animal without the Division of Wildlife's approval. And normally, if they're going to approve that, they will do it themselves. Yeah, that kind of covers everything there. So a couple of the options, we'll go through a lot of options. I'm not going to say that like every animal has to be killed that's causing a problem. That's not the point of my topic. It's more to show you ideas and give you some help on how to deal with these problems, these animals, if they become a problem. And we're not going to talk just about killing these animals. But spotlighting as an option for some animals, especially like in your guys' fruit orchards, raccoons and skunks, not coyotes and red fox. That's one that they're legal to spotlight with approval. But skunks and raccoons might be more what you're going to deal with in an orchard setting. But you got to have permission from the county sheriff in order to spotlight. They're gonna ask where it is that you're spotlighting, what's the reason, if you're in the vicinity of housing that's going to be or developments that's going to be an issue shooting, or if you've got a lot of domestic animals, they're probably not going to allow you that permission. And then it's also according to county ordinances. So sometimes the county will have different rules and regulations based off where you are on what caliber you can use or different things like that. So there's poison. Poison is one of those things it's really risky. It's often non-selective and it can be very permanent to anything. And when we're using poison on aphids or grasshoppers or something like that, we're really able to specifically target, like insects in general, or sometimes maybe we're targeting just aphids or just insects that have the same mouth parts as aphids, or there's ways to hone that down onto what insects we're targeting, and you can do that with weed pesticides as well. So I can target broadleafs or I can target grasses, but with poisons for vertebrates. A poison that can kill a mouse can kill a human, and a poison that can kill a mouse or a human can kill a dog. And so you got to be really, really careful with these poisons. A lot of times, with the animals you're dealing with, you'll find that there may not be any poisons actually registered for the use of that animal. The label is always the law. So if you're going to try to use poison, be sure you're reading that label. What animals are you authorized to kill with this poison? How to use that poison safely. The last thing you want is to throw poison out there and for a rodent to pack it somewhere else, to a horse barn or something like that, and then you feed that hay to a horse and it kills it, or you administer it wrong and it kills someone or their dog. So be really, really careful with poisons, and we'll go through some of these. Some of these animals, the poison option is a reasonable option. Okay, trapping. This one is one that gets a lot of negative feedback as well. I'm just going to say trapping is a management tool. It can help manage populations. We can manage it for disease. We can target specific animals with it. We can let animals loose that were non-target animals, relatively unharmed most of the time. This isn't necessarily super relevant to orchards here, but this is a coyote that has mange, and mange is one of those things that can be controlled with smaller populations of these animals. So trapping can be used to decrease these populations. So in your orchards, if you're having extreme losses maybe taking out several of these animals would be better than taking out all of them, and it's going to give you a little bit of a benefit on your return on your fruit. The Division of Wildlife uses it when they're relocating animals such as beavers or even wolves or prairie dogs. So it's one of those things that it does have a place if it's used right. We're not going to talk a whole lot about the traps here, but you see on the bottom middle, there's a conibear trap. These are a kill trap. They're made to hit the animal on the top and the bottom at the same time and kill that animal as it strikes it. This bottom one on the right, that's a dog-proof trap. These are awesome on skunks and raccoons, and you can't catch a dog in them. You can occasionally catch a cat, and if you have a restraining device, you can turn them loose. Anytime you have to turn loose a cat is not a fun thing because those cats are like a Tasmanian devil in there. So, but you can turn them loose unharmed in those. And then you have on your far right, on the top in the middle, you have your long spring and your coil spring traps. Those are mainly used, for your foxes, bobcats, those kind of things. You can use them for raccoons, but in your guys' orchard settings, a raccoon dog-proof trap is probably going to be the main one you use. And you might find spots that you can use a conibear trap if you use it in a tree. And I'll show you in a future slide what that might look like. Snares, I would recommend staying away from snares. That's the top middle one. They have different types of snares, but most snares are made to kill that animal really soon after they're caught. And so most of you guys in an orchard aren't going to be dealing with coyotes or things like that you're going to be worried about with your fruit. But they can also catch a dog, so be very, very careful with those. And then obviously your box traps on the bottom left. Really good choice, especially if you don't know what's causing the damage. You can always open up that trap and let it loose, as long as you're checking that trap daily. And in this trap, the point of it is to have a live animal unharmed in that trap, and so you should check it every day. Okay, so sets. The bottom left here is typically how you set a long spring or a coil spring trap. You dig it down, bed it really, really good, set that soil around it really tightly. Usually you put something over top of the pan and then you sift dirt over top of that. And then you use a hole and you put your bait in the hole. You can catch almost any type of predator in this trap. Works really good for a shy raccoon or a fox or animals like that. This one on the top, that's what I was talking about. The conibear, the killing trap, is you can put it in a box like this and put it on a slanted limb, and now the animals that you're more likely to catch have decreased to just a few animals are going to be able to climb that tree. So you're not going to catch a dog, not going to catch most foxes or a bobcat or something like that, but you might obviously a squirrel running up that post is going to be way more likely to get caught on that. So in your guys' fruit tree settings, especially if you're setting it way off the ground, that's an option. So rules and regulations. The Division of Wildlife manages all wildlife in Utah, with the exception of the ones that the Department of Agriculture manages, like we talked about, the red foxes, the skunks, the different things like that you don't need a permit for. If you're really wanting to know more about trapping and those types of regulations, you can look up the current Utah Fur Bearer Guidebook. It will go through season dates, bag limits, how to get your licensing, all those kind of things. I also teach a fur harvester class course. Anyone born after 1985, I believe it is, has to have a course in order to take any of these fur bearing animals. So if a fur bearer animal, for example, you're not going to deal with most of these in your guys' fruit settings, but a badger, bobcat, those types of animals have to have a permit to handle those. So you've got to have this class. Okay, and then if you're going to call up somebody and say, hey, can you deal with my problem? Most of the time you're going to find an urban wildlife nuisance control officer. Now you can Google this, DWR webpage will pop up, and they'll have the people that are listed in the state of Utah that are authorized to deal with wildlife nuisance animals. Now these people, they they have to follow the Animal Veterinary Medical Association guideline for euthanasia. And there's a big long list. of things they can and can't do. But it authorizes them to use certain substances like carbon monoxide or dioxide. And I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh yeah, I caught a raccoon and I threw it in a sleeping bag and I tied it to my exhaust pipe with my car." That's illegal. Don't do that. Unless you have this registration in order to do this, and you have the materials and tools needed to do that. You have to have it in a chamber. You must be able to see inside that chamber. It has to reach a 6% exactly saturation rate, and you cannot use carbon monoxide from a combustible source such as engine exhaust. So there's a lot of things to stay away from. Now, for the regular homeowner, me and you that are dealing with these animals, most of the methods for euthanasia are not available to us. Topical, oral injections. So you're stuck with the physical methods. A captive bolt, if you have one, blunt force trauma to the head, which most people don't look at as extremely ethical, gunshot to the head or the heart, cervical dislocation, also not the funnest, or decapitation. So a lot of these methods, even though they're euthanasia, are not super pleasant to most people. So a lot of people prefer to have an urban wildlife nuisance control officer come down. In some places, your city or your county will actually pay somebody to do this. I know in Moab City, they used to do that years ago. They no longer do it. So if that's an option for you, that's a good thing to have. If not, you're left up to yourself on how to handle these animals. One of the questions I get is, what do I do after this animal is euthanized? For me and you, using if we're shooting the animal or we're dispatching it through blunt force trauma or something like that, really, there's a lot of options. You always want to have gloves on. Make sure you're handling this animal safely. You don't want to get any of that blood on you. Don't breathe in its air. They're going to have insects, fleas, ticks. Be careful with those. But you can bury this animal. I would recommend burying it at least a foot deep. You don't want anything to dig it back up. And then you don't want to bury it really close to water source or if you have a high water table. You can incinerate it. Most of the time, you're not going to have a spot that's really ideal for incinerating a large animal or even a smaller animal, but it is an option. If you're using poison, then you have to follow the label. If the label says you can't incinerate it or you can't bury it or those kind of things, you need to follow that. Most landfills will take animals, so a lot of times they recommend double bagging your dead animal, throwing it in the trash, and they'll take it to a landfill. At the landfill, they'll dispose of it properly. And then you can leave lay if you have a big enough spot of land where the buzzards or crows can come get it. They can take care of it there. You can compost it. I don't highly recommend composting these animals because it's going to draw more pests. So with integrated pest management, we're looking at all different types of ways to manage these pests rather than just one option. So when I say like mechanical or physical controls, I'm looking at barriers or exclusion. I could look at biological controls such as predators, hawks or foxes or different things like that to control squirrels or whatever's bothering you, rather than just always going to shooting or always going to poison. But it goes both ways. Maybe barriers and exclusion doesn't always get rid of the problem. Okay, so in the chat, we're running a little bit low on time, so I'm going to kind of buzz through these. What animal caused this damage? I'm not seeing any chats. Okay. Oh, I guess you might have to do to everyone instead of just to hosts and panelists
Yeah,
for it to pop
Corey, it
up.
might be disabled
Oh, it
on
might be disabled.
their end.
Okay.
I'm not
Okay, if
sure.
that's the case, well, it's a bear. There we go. There's a bear. Okay, so on this damage here, we're seeing these branches are pulled straight down. In my area, bears are probably the number one predator of apples and fruit. When you see when a bear sees a berry, that bear has got to be so excited. Or when a bear sees an apple or a fruit, sorry, instead of just a regular berry. I mean, like that berry's like that big, he's super excited. But they can be extremely damaging to limbs. They can become aggressive. I've been charged by several out in apple orchards here. It's not fun. They have to be managed by the DWR. It's can be helpful to have dogs around. Hazing doesn't really work once they become territorial of the fruit or their food. Here we have beaver damage. So you want to identify these animals the best you can before you go out and try to get rid of the problem. But with a beaver, this is one animal that the Division of Wildlife will most likely help you relocate. But you do have to contact them in advance and get approval to trap and move these animals, and they will move them for you. They can be euthanized with the proper permit as well. This here is bird damage. With birds, I've found, and at least in my area, we're looking at mainly crows, ravens, and magpies. There's other birds out there that definitely cause damage, but you see in this picture in the bottom left here, you can count that if you want to. I counted over 150 ravens in that picture. And then these ravens sit on an apple orchard, and within a couple days, they can completely remove all apples or fruit from your trees. It can be really difficult. Ravens you cannot manage currently. You'd have to talk to the Division of Wildlife. You can scare them away if you're using a combination of shooting and scarecrows. They're really, really smart. So they're gonna know if that scarecrow hasn't moved. They're gonna test that out. But if you're out there all the time, hazing and moving that scarecrow around, that's really helpful. They have some evidence that shining lasers from the ground up into the trees bothers these types of birds. You cannot trap them. You can look up like a ladder trap. They work super good, but it's illegal to use them. So you're going to have to deal with the Division of Wildlife to manage your ravens. Now, crows and magpies, you can shoot at them. And most of the time, I'd recommend if you do have problems with these animals, if you only kill a couple and you're out there shooting at them, that's pretty much all you have to kill is just a few of them, and then they're going to be really leery about coming back. And so you're not going out there and getting rid of all the magpies or all the crows. Occasionally you have problems with woodpeckers, and I would say more often than not, your woodpeckers are your friends. They're going to be getting insects. Occasionally you have woodpeckers that definitely cause damage and need to be removed. This picture on the bottom left here is a sapsucker going out, and actually they wait for the insects to come on the sap that they draw out and then eat those insects. They're not even getting insects from your trees. And then this picture of the turkeys here, I've seen turkeys decimate an entire orchard in just a couple of days, so they can be a problem. Again, hazing can work really well on these, especially if you have dogs or something like that, but they can be really difficult to fence out. This here is deer damage. You can see that deer like to scrape their antlers on the branch, and then they'll also eat off the buds and the leaves off of the branches. You're gonna have to have an 8 foot fence, an 8 foot tall fence around your orchard. You can use a 6 foot tall fence, but they're gonna occasionally get through. It's got to be 8 feet in order to exclude deer. I hear a lot of stuff like, "Oh, just buy some mountain lion or wolf urine and spread it out around your yard." Well, it might work for you for a little bit, but it's not going to always work. Most of those methods aren't proven to work. Foxes, I'm just going to say briefly, gray foxes can climb trees and they do love to eat fruit. They're probably not going to cause enough damage to your fruit to even notice them. But just to show you, this is a picture I took of a gray fox, and it's about 50 feet up in this ash tree here in Moab. So they can climb trees. They're kind of a cool animal. This here is muskrat. They are probably not going to be much of a problem for most of you guys, but if you're close to a swamp or a drainage, they can cause some damage to small branches. Well, the big thing here is you see this picture on the bottom is that they like to divert irrigation, and so they can cause flooding and damage that way. If you can dry up your irrigation ditches completely for even just a short amount of time, muskrats will move, and you won't have to do much with them. This here is an opossum causing damage to the fruit. They like to eat fruit. Like I said, here in Moab, we've caught 7 of them now. So they're coming, they're on their way. An electric fence is a great way to keep them out. They're really sensitive to that. They've got no fur on their paws, and so they're when they're climbing through or touching things, that they're really sensitive to that. I would recommend reporting them to the Division of Wildlife or to your local extension agent. If they can remove them since they're not native to Utah, that would be awesome. This is a gopher. A lot of times the gophers will cause damage to your roots. So gophers, they have a lot of different traps for them. The Gophinator was our favorite trap. You can order these online relatively cheap. You dig a hole down. They've got two holes. They have a horseshoe shaped burrow. You can dig down, find their holes, put those traps right in them, and you can get rid of gophers on like 5 acres really, really easily with traps. If you have the ability to use strychnine, you can use that underground only because that's another one that's it's toxic to other animals. Zinc phosphate, phosphide, and anticoagulants also work for pocket gophers. I'm running low on time here, sorry. We're going to skip prairie dogs for now. Raccoons, I mentioned the coon cuff traps. Electric mesh fences are awesome on raccoons. This is skunk sign. Usually they're not going to cause a lot of problems to your orchards. But if you have to deal with them, a lot of times you just treat for grubs around if you have a lawn, if that's what's drawing them. But most of the time they're just going to run around and eat up the fruit off of the ground. This here is the number one culprit I see in my area of fruit loss, and that's the Utah rock squirrel. There's lots of squirrels out there and they cause lots of damage, lots of different damage. But usually they shuck the tree entirely and eat the pits or the seeds. And your best bet is trapping them. If you can find where their burrows are, you can trap them and get relatively good control. This squirrelinator trap can catch multiple squirrels at the same time, and they're really easy to bait, really easy to set. You can catch, I mean, we set the first one we caught 9 squirrels in at the same time. So they work really well. It's really hard to keep squirrels out of an orchard, but again, electric fence meshing has been helpful. And then just lastly here, voles. This is all vole damage. You can see where the voles have chewed the bark off of the trees here. Voles, the biggest thing you can do is to knock down growth before winter comes, before the snow falls. And then if you have enough time and availability, if you can use hardware cloth, 4 to 6 inches into the ground deep and 18 to 24 inches high around your tree, that really helps with the voles. And my family lost over 500 apple trees to voles in 1 year. So they can be extremely tough. We found personally that the zinc phosphide didn't work super great. What would have been best for us would to have cows come in and graze that down, and then hardware cloth would have worked great. But we had ended up having to replant. I've got more on here, but you guys can contact me if you have questions about any of this. I'll hand it over to Ben now.